You want to follow with me in the Word, I'll be in John chapter 17 in just a minute. As you can probably tell by the lobby decor, we are committing the month of February to celebrating our 100th birthday. And it's in these first few weeks of a brand new century for Northplace Church that we've chosen to look back at the faithfulness of God and the faithfulness of a whole lot of people that have grown this church from its humble beginnings to where it is today. Just a quick glance, if you were to just look back over the last 100 years, you're going to have three reoccurring things that have been foundational to the life of this church. Our story as a people of faith is all about transformational encounters with Jesus. That's the Christ component. Life-giving relationships with each other. That's the community component. And acts of ministry and service within the church and to the world around us. That's the compassion component. Last week we looked at the Christ component by examining the specific Jesus encounters throughout history that have built and are still building this church. In essence, all we are here at Northplace Church is a collection of Jesus encounters. That's what any church is. A unique collection of individual people who have met Jesus and they are growing into a spiritual family. Like the spokes of a wheel that run into a hub, all of our individual stories are coming together to form a hub that is a church, and in our case, Northplace Church. We are a collection of Jesus encounters. That was last week. Today I want us to talk about the community piece of our legacy, that relationship piece. Because when you look back over the last 100 years, one of the key ingredients of this church's survival through the last century, ups and downs and depressions and wars and social unrest, it has been our commitment to each other that has sustained us. And as we look back at this relationship piece, I want Jesus to be our example. We've been doing that since the beginning of the year, looking at Jesus' habits and patterns and priorities in certain areas, learning to model our life after those. And today I want us to look at his patterns and priorities as it relates to human interaction, as it relates to relationship. I mean, shouldn't our relationships with each other be different because we are followers of Jesus? And if that's true, just how should those relationships that have been transformed by Jesus be different from those who haven't? There's a real difference between general social interaction among everyday people and the supernatural relationship among the community of God's people. On the surface, from the outside looking in, they may not look all that different, but they are. General social interaction between people is natural, it's psychological, it's a social phenomenon. But Christian community is a divine creation. It's God's idea. It is a supernatural occurrence. When lived out the way God designed it, our relationships with each other are incarnational, which means God has chosen to come live in, dwell in, take up residence in the community of his people. And because that kind of community is supernatural, it's counterintuitive to us. It is not natural. It doesn't go with the natural flow of our life. So we have to work on it, just like we have to work on becoming more like Jesus. When we understand what the Scripture says, what God really expects for his people, it changes our whole perspective and thinking about relationships. And when you study the way Jesus handled relationships, it helps us make transitions. There are really 5 I want to point out today, necessary relationship transitions that we learn by studying Jesus' priorities and patterns in relationship. It will help us transition from conversion to community, from association to participation, from self-righteousness to compassion, from drudgery to celebration, from individualism to being fully present. Look at the first one, from conversion to community. In the 17th chapter of John's Gospel, you have this incredible glimpse into a very intimate moment of Jesus' private prayer life. The Gospels let us peek through a window into a very intimate moment of his life where we find Jesus praying. And he's praying for us. And I want you to listen closely to exactly what he says in his prayer. Verse 20, I am praying not only for these disciples, but also for all who will ever believe in me because or through their message. So that's us. And that means he's praying for us. Here's how he prays for us in verse 21. I pray that they will all be one, just as you and I are one, as you are in me, Father, and I am in you. And may they be in us. And here's why. Here's why he so wants us connected to each other. So that the world will believe that you sent me. His heart's desire is that there's this deep relational connection and community among his people. And he says this oneness and community is the way the world is actually going to believe that the Father has sent him. Which means, according to Jesus, the greatest defense of the Christian faith and the divinity of Jesus is revealed in the way that we interact with each other as the followers of Christ. Which also means when we don't function in biblical community with each other, our lack of community can be the greatest harm to the Christian faith and what other people end up believing about Jesus. So let me challenge you to think differently about the way people come into the church, how the way people come in to this spiritual family. Over the years, we've thrown around the word converts or conversions to describe people who have come to Christ. At least for me, those words elicit the image of crusaders coercing pagans to convert or else. And there is a tragic historical reality to those words and those images because it happened in the Crusades from 1000 AD to about 1500 AD, which is why there's an ickiness associated with the word conversions. Yes, there's nothing more beautiful than the change of heart that results in a change of life. But the Bible most often calls that experience being born again. The thought that throughout our lives, that in the blink of an eye, we can be changed and then beautifully recrafted by grace throughout the course of our lives is remarkable. But we minimize the beauty of what happens if we simply see it as the conversion of converts. If that's the way we see it, they stop being people we care about and they become religious goals that we're trying to conquer. Far too many people view it the religious way and not the Jesus way. When your religious zeal motivates you instead of a genuine love for people, you start thinking it's your job to make converts. So you force unnatural conversations and you enter into awkwardly aggressive attempts to win souls. We have to remember that Jesus had no intention of starting a religion for which he would be seeking converts. It was quite the opposite. He came to start a coup against the religious establishment of his day by stripping away the religiosity and calling people into a real, authentic relationship with the Father. And at the same time, that new relationship with the Father was going to give us a new kind of relationship with each other as his family. When you consider the joy of being a part of the family of God, and you stop thinking about it religiously and stop viewing people as pagans to be converted, instead, you see them as a vital part of God's creation that has been estranged from the family table. And you start living your life in such a way that they're drawn towards Christian community and nurtured toward the table where the Father has been saving them a seat all along. When we simply love and live like we're a part of a big family and we convey the gospel's message of adoption, we become more like brothers and sisters inviting estranged family members back to the family table instead of religious zealots waging war on the infidels of the world. Following Jesus' patterns from relationship will move us from conversion mindset to community mindset. Here's the second transition, from association to participation. The Bible could not be any clearer. You cannot become all that you're supposed to be in Christ without being in meaningful relationship with other believers. There are over 30 commands in the Bible. They're referred to as the one another commands that you cannot fulfill. You cannot honor or live out unless you're in community. Unless you move from these rows of the big event into smaller circles of relationship. We have to move from association to participation. Think about it in terms of going on a flight. You go to the same airport with people. You have the same flight number as the same group of people. You occupy the same boarding area as this group of people. You get in the same line to get on the plane. You're all headed to the same destination. There's an obvious sense of forced association with all these people. But it's also obvious to any of us that travel often that the great majority of the people in this forced association are doing everything they can to minimize interaction with the other people on the same journey that they are on. There's an unspoken code of social distance in the airport. Yes, we are forced to be together to all get where we're going. There's a desire for association, but no desire for participation. Now transpose that airport experience onto church. Sadly, far too many people want the same thing out of their church relationships that they get out of an airport terminal. And sadly, most people's church experience and relationships at church are as empty and shallow and sterile and meaningless as those in an airport terminal. We drive into the same parking lot, we come into the same building, we experience the same worship, we listen to the same sermon, we call the same church our home church. We have some level of forced association with each other to experience all of this together today. A surface level association is fine if you're on an airplane headed to New York, but it falls far short of what God desires for you if you're a part of His family. I've had some crazy experiences on airplanes over the last 30 years. I've had to sit far too close for far too long to people I don't even know. And most of the time, I'm very happy to join that association with the unspoken agreement that we're all going to stay in our own worlds. But I have seen that underlying agreement go out the window when turbulence hits the plane. Everybody that was happy with association all of a sudden is wanting participation when the plane starts shaking in the air. If we want our Christian life to become what God desires it to be, we have to move from association with the church and its people and get genuinely involved through participation. We need to be in a place where we can know and be known. Life-giving, discipling relationships where iron sharpens iron is not a scriptural suggestion for the Christian life. It is a biblical mandate. We can't mature into who and what we are supposed to be as people without those relationships. And we're not just selling something or making noise up here when we talk about small groups or inviting you to get involved in a ministry or serving team. Those are simply the tools and places where this association moves to participation at Northplace. We have the opportunity to truly get involved with each other's lives. In the last 6 verses of Acts 2, you have this incredibly detailed glimpse into what life was like every day in the New Testament church. It's beautiful. And in verse 42, this is what the church looked like in its infancy. In the early days, all the believers devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and to fellowship and sharing in meals and to prayer. They learned the word together. They were in regular social interaction with each other. That's fellowship, which included strengthening their relationships by sharing meals and doing life together, and then they prayed together. The New Testament model of living the Christian life is doing life together, not just going to church together, but actually allowing the fabric of your life to be woven into the fabric of other people's lives to form this beautiful tapestry that is the family of God, which means we bring all of our sin, our dysfunction, our brokenness, the process of our transformation, all of our growth and setbacks, and we create this beautifully broken family that functions together by the miracle of God's grace. It's important, it's necessary, and it's a non-negotiable. It's transformational because it was God's idea, and it's supernatural. The German theologian Dietrich Bonhoeffer often wrote about real Christian community in his books and various writings, and he made this statement: "Let him who is not in community beware of being alone. Into community you were called. The call was not meant for you alone. In the community of the called, you bear your cross, you struggle, you pray." In other words, when you were called out of your old life into a new life of following Jesus, you weren't just called to Christ. You were simultaneously called into His family. Bonhoeffer calls us the community of the called. There isn't an option taking one without the other. You don't take Jesus and not be committed to His family. It's one and the same. To be in relationship with Jesus is to be in relationship with His family. It's the way He designed it. It's the only way to become as a follower of Christ. from conversion to community, from association to participation, and thirdly, doing relationships like Jesus will lead us from self-righteousness to compassion. It's human nature for us to elevate the sins of others and minimize our own, which is the essence of self-righteousness. But you can never enter into real community. You can never approach a church. You can never approach any relationship that you want to grow if you come into that relationship with judgmental and critical lenses. Jesus was known on the streets as a friend of sinners. Over and over again in the New Testament, they called him that in a negative way, a friend of sinners, because of the amount of time that he spent with people that didn't share his values. But he never alienated those people and never compromised or lowered his standards in the process. How did he do that? Because he had compassion on them by understanding their whole story. He knew their whole story. His heart broke for them, and he had compassion on them. Let me explain what I mean. These camps that we run for kids, they have behavioral issues. I mean, it's not uncommon for us that we train our volunteers. There's a lot of hours spent in training, because we get punched in the face, cussed out, spit on, kicked. I mean, all kinds of things happen. And you see that behavior, and if your heart's not right and it's happening to you, you're going to react. But when you have a chance to sit down and look at the case file of the kid, and you realize the hell they have lived through at the hands of adults that were perverted or abusive or neglect or whatever, you realize this kid has become what adults made them. When you see the whole story, it doesn't excuse the behavior. It just helps you see it through different lenses and infuses you with eyes of compassion and a heart that breaks. Instead of anger, your heart breaks for them. It's the way Jesus saw people. He saw their whole story. It changes everything. It moves you from self-righteousness to compassion. Here's another example. I regularly get emails from people who come to Northplace from sketchy backgrounds. That don't fit with the religious institution. And they will often say, I've been coming for a while. These people are either brand new to faith or they are just on the verge. They want to be a follower and they're still trying to gather more information. They're seeking. And they're on the verge of coming to faith. And they will often say, I just need to get this off my chest. I need somebody to know. I'm afraid to share it with anybody in the church. But things like, and these are real examples, I'm an exotic dancer, or I'm coming out of being an exotic dancer, or I used to be an exotic dancer. There's been more of those than you can imagine. And I need somebody to know. I need somebody to pray for me. I want to be a follower of Jesus. All this but I'm afraid to say anything to anybody because I'm afraid they'll treat me different. Or a guy that's been paroled from prison, and he tells me in the email why he got in prison, how he met Jesus in prison, but he's afraid to let anybody else know because he's afraid he'll be treated differently. I have a lot of emotions when I get those kind of emails. First, I'm humbled that they're willing to trust me to share something they're not telling anybody else. But then I also feel grief because I'm afraid they're right. I'm afraid that if certain people knew who they were or where they came from, instead of welcoming arms like this is the place you need to be, there would be religious scowls of condemnation that look at them and treat them differently. It would be self-righteousness instead of compassion. And it grieves me that I'm afraid they're right. We have to lay down our self-righteous judgments long enough to get to know people's whole story and give community a chance. And when true community take root, our judgments will be replaced by grace and compassion. And sure, over time, as we build relationship and trust, we're going to earn the right to address areas in people's lives that need loving confrontation. But that comes through trust and through relationship. In our relationships, Jesus moves us from conversion to community, from association to participation, from self-righteousness to compassion, and fourth, from drudgery to celebration. In the church, we have lost the art of celebration. We've forgotten how to party. And I'm not talking about the kind of party you did before you came to Christ, but the art of having fun with people. Far too many people meet Jesus and get boring. If you're a boring person living a boring life, don't blame Jesus. And don't blame the Christian faith. Everywhere Jesus went, he was the life of the party. So much so, the crowd accused him, the religious crowd accused him of being a drunkard and a friend of sinners because he was so often seen in public places of celebration. The majority of his parables center around banquets and feasts and parties. The center of his life message was celebration. Think about it. The grand culmination of the whole story of God is this incredible banquet celebration in the book of Revelation known as the marriage supper of the Lamb. Jesus' followers are going to have to recover their ability to have fun without the crutches the culture uses to fuel their parties. If you have to use the crutch of booze or any other substance to have fun, you're the boring one in need. Jesus' followers should be the freest, happiest, most liberated people on planet Earth. So let the joy of your lives and the joy of your worship be the fuel in your relationship. Celebrate with each other. Enjoy life with each other. Have a party with each other. Jesus moves us from conversion to community, from association to participation, from self-righteousness to compassion, from drudgery to celebration, and fifth, from individualism to being fully present. Our culture conditions us to think and act as individuals, not as the member of a body. We're Americans and we celebrate rugged individualism. But our rugged individualism often stands in the way of us experiencing real, genuine community. And modern digital communication technologies haven't helped. They further eroded our relationships by replacing face-to-face interaction with images on a screen. But I want you to look at God's example. As great as the Bible is, God did not just send us a text message. He sent a text message, but that's not all He did. If He had just sent the text, the Bible, salvation would ultimately be in our hands, and it would be up to us to uncode the riddle and follow His instructions like it was a treasure map. But instead of just sending a text message, He came. He embodied the text, He embodied the Word, He put skin on it and flesh on it, and He lived it out and showed us what it looked like in human flesh. In the incarnation, Jesus became fully present with us. He gave up some of His individual rights. He left heaven, Philippians 2 tells us that. He stooped down, descended into our mess to be in relationship with us. So Jesus' model for relationship was dying to Himself because He valued relationship with us more highly than some of His individual rights. And He expects us to do the same in our relationship with other people. Inconvenience yourself. Be fully present. Be all there. It's not enough to simply show up at a church. Be present in people's lives. We have to embody our faith in relationship with His people. We have to give grace to other people the same way we have received it from Him through selfless, servant-hearted relationship. What turns an association into a community is when they are drawn together by some common thing, some common object. So you can have weak community around a common interest, music, sports, a hobby, but strong community comes together around deep beliefs, causes, and powerful common experiences. Which means if we have experienced the radical grace of Jesus, and it has become the most intense foundational event of our lives, and then we meet other people that come from completely different cultures and races and economic backgrounds, but they too have encountered Jesus, we don't see the differences first. We realize we're looking at someone who's been through the same life and death transformation we have, and because of this common experience of grace, we often have deeper identity markers with them than we do our own biological family, our own race, or our own culture. Every kindred, tongue, tribe, and nation fits together in Christ. I want to do something this morning that for those of you that are around here a while, you've heard, I've done this a few times in the last 17 years. But when I want to have like a pastoral heart-to-heart, I get the pulpit out of the way and I bring out a stool. Okay? When I sit on a stool, the sermon's over. Okay? It's just a talk. So I want to share my heart. I'm going to take a risk. I almost didn't do this today. because it could be misinterpreted so many different ways by so many different groups of people. But I just felt as I was working on the message and I came to this last point that I needed to quit preaching and just talk from my heart. So here, I'm going to take a risk. When we started planning for the 100th celebration and going through all the records and stuff and pulling out all the pictures and working on the timeline up there, I kept thinking it, and then I said it out loud, and I said, I guess I had a couple of emotions. At first, I had grief. The majority of our church's history until recent history has been an all-white history. And I grieved that. I grieved that other cultures are coming into something that was predominantly white. And I get it. It's another time, another era. I understand the demographics of this place 100 years ago, and I get all that. I understand that. But it grieved me that the history on the wall is predominantly all white until recently. And then it moved from grief to gratitude because I realized should Jesus tarry his coming and there be another second centennial celebration and they start showing photos of this era, it's going to look drastically different than the last one. And I was grateful for that. Haley and I, our first church was in South Arkansas, and I was 25 when I became the pastor there. And when the board was interviewing me to take the job, it was a predominantly white church in a predominantly African-American community. The school system there was 99% black. And when these men were interviewing me, I'm 25, all right? But I looked at them and I said, if you hire me to be your pastor, I'm going to reach this city. I'm not driving outside the area where this church is located to get past all the black people so I can start reaching white people. I'm going to reach the community this church is in. And you need to know that before you hire me, because there are going to be battles to fight, and you're going to have my back. I'm 25. Some of you are 70 and 60 and 50. You're going to know what you're getting into, and I'm telling you now. And they said, we'll do it. And they sent me like a lamb into the slaughter. That's what they did. They just said, yeah, we'll back you. But they did back me. And God, for whatever reason, gave us incredible favor. A traditionally white church began to become more racially diverse until it became more predominantly African American. I was given a gift as a young white guy pastoring in a culture that was very different from mine. I'll always be an outsider to minority cultures, always. But I was given an invite to come in intimately into the lives of a lot of the people I pastored. And I learned some stuff. I learned the things that they were being accused of and criticized of for allowing a white man to be their pastor and going to what had traditionally been a white church. And we wept together and we cried together. And I also learned how big this month is for them. That this was Black History Month. And that culture, a part of the black church, is as much a part of their identity as anything else. And when they give that up to come here, especially in a month like this, they lose something. I think they gain something. I think we all gain something by being a part of something diverse. But I acknowledge what you've lost if you're African American by being a part of this church, especially in a month where the biggest month of the year in the culturally black church is right now, and you're not there. And I want to acknowledge that today. But it's not just African Americans. It's Indians. It's all these cultures. But like, for example, for whatever reason, I had a lot of favor among the Indian church. I was asked to come preach at a big event in Houston. I wasn't the normal speaker. The guy had to cancel last minute. I got asked to fill in last minute. I had been on a 40-day fast. Literally, I was skin and bones, and I came up eating my first meals at that Indian conference, but I was walking with God, man, coming out of that. And for whatever reason, there was a supernatural encounter at the end of that fast, and that thousands of people in that Indian conference, and for whatever reason, the Lord gave us favor with that community, and I could literally preach every day of the year in an Indian church for the rest of my life. I get that many invitations. But I also know because of those conferences and conventions, when young Indian families relocate to Dallas and they have a relationship with me because of a conference somewhere along the way and they choose to come here instead of go to a traditional Indian church, I know the ridicule and the backlash they take in their community for coming here. I know that. Now, if you're not in that world, you don't realize that people of color, of minority cultures that come to this church or any other church that's not predominantly their minority culture, there's backlash in their own community. And so what I want to say to you, those of you that are in the minority cultures, I want to bless you today. I want to thank you for your sacrifice. I want to thank you for making us who we are as a church. We're not there yet. We have a long ways to go, but we are becoming better, and you're part of the reason. And I want to say thank you to the majority culture for making space and valuing the differences among us, because we are supposed to be a church that Revelations talks about: every kindred, every tongue, every tribe, every nation. When I was a young pastor here, I was 31. I was 31 when I became the pastor here 17 years ago. About a year in, I called a friend of mine who was a mentor, an Indian man from North India, former pastor, Bible college president. And I said, you got to help me. I got all this vision. We have hundreds. I have a vision of thousands. And he said, all right, here's what I want you to do, Brian. Forget I'm in the room. And when you close your eyes, I want the intimate part of your prayer life. What you see when you close your eyes, I want you to say it. Don't be afraid. We don't have to share what I write down with anybody. I just want you to describe what you see when you pray. So close your eyes and just start talking. For 15 minutes, it poured out of me. I opened up like a well. And a part of that 15 minutes was this. I said, I see a future in our church where there are thousands of people that are gathering on a weekend service, and our worship gathering looks like a gathering of the United Nations. We have sent millions of dollars around the world in mission, and I want that millions of dollars to be a seed, so that when the return on that investment is that when those nations and tribes move to Dallas-Fort Worth, that their people come and worship with us, that the globe makes this their home church. The kindred, every tongue, every tribe, every nation. That when we have a missions emphasis weekend and we literally carry flags of the nations of the world into our sanctuary, I want the person bearing the flag to literally be from that nation. And now they call this church home. Every single nation of the world. We only have about 52 of those right now, so we have a lot of nations of the world, but not enough because they're all represented here. I say all of that to tell you that are minority cultures, from Hispanic to Indian to Asian to African American to Ghanaian to Ethiopian, I don't care. I just say all that to tell you, you are an answer to prayer. You are a gift to this body. Your culture is a gift to this body. I mean, I love when I'm with 18 of those different nations are Spanish-speaking nations. And I love as an outsider walking into our Spanish language small groups, and the way I break the ice is I just say you got Guatemalans and Hondurans and Cubans and Mexicans and Costa Ricans and El Salvadorians, and I'm sitting there and I just say, okay, who speaks the best Spanish? And then I get my popcorn. I just love the diversity. My last Sunday in Pine Bluff, nobody knew that I was about to resign. The church there, the diversity was black or white. And sprinkled into the black were a large delegation of Africans that had moved to the city to teach at the university. And so they were from Uganda, they were from Kenya, they were from Nigeria. And they were professors, and they had started calling our church home. And for whatever reason, nobody knew what I was about to do except Haley. And for that day, she happened to sit where all the Africans gathered, all the professors, the doctors in the fisheries department at the university. And she was this one single speck of white surrounded by all these Africans. And they were singing loud. I love the dialect, the accents when they talk, sing, and pray. And they were singing loud. And I could tell Haley was eating it up. I mean, she was this was just like she was in her world. And so I looked over at her and saw what was happening, and she caught eyes with me, knowing I was about to resign. And because of that moment, she whispered to me, she mouthed this to me. She said, "Don't do it." The fear was we're going to leave this. So our prayer coming in is, God, don't let us lose this. Our first Sunday here, some of you were here, and I probably shouldn't have. I was young and dumb and didn't have a filter, but I just said, my first Sunday here, I said, this room is too white. We need more diversity. Thankfully, over the course of the last 17 years, that has become true. We have much more room to go. But I want to celebrate you, minority cultures, the majority cultures, for making a way for us becoming what we are today, that it would look different. Today, I am honored to be a part of a church that is becoming a place of every kindred, every tongue, every tribe, every nation. I want you to stand with me, if you will, all over this place today. I want to speak a blessing over your life, and I want to encourage you. Would you, I'm not bringing the prayer team forward today. If you came in here with a desperate need of prayer, all of our small group leaders were just trained in our prayer ministry, and they're ready to serve you today. Okay, they're ready to serve you if you want to connect with a group, or if you need prayer. Any small group leader out there ready to serve you today. Let them serve you in the lobby today. But act on this word. Move from association to participation today by getting out of a row and into a circle and take a journey, a life-giving journey of relationship. Father, would you bless them? Would you keep them? Would you make your face shine down upon them? Would you be gracious to them? Would you turn your countenance their direction today? And would you grant them peace? In Jesus' name, amen.
Hey, thank you for watching the Northplace Church YouTube channel. If today's message impacted you, we would love for you to join our Northplace from Any Place family so that we can connect with you and help you take the next steps in your relationship with Jesus. Subscribe to this channel so that you don't miss any of the content available to you. And if you would like to partner with us in furthering the mission of God through Northplace Church, click the link for ways to give and be a part of what is happening here at Northplace. I'm so glad that you joined us today, and I look forward to seeing you right back here next week.